So, hi Padma, and thanks for making yourself available for this interview.
Thank you.
A question I have is, do you have anything to offer to people in your meetings?
That's a trick question, right?
No. People probably come to your satsangs thinking you can give them something, right? They come to you.
Yeah, that's true.
So what would you say to that? What is your offering to people when they come see you?
So that's a really funny question. Why I'm saying this is a trick question is because, of course, as you both know, you've been to satsang, you've been around for some years by now, you know that nothing is really given and nothing is attained that wasn't already there, always. It's like, what it's all about is discovering what's always been here. What's your true nature? What cannot possibly be given by anybody or anything. And yet, of course, when I discovered that and when I experienced the support that I did experience from my teachers to discover that, it's like, of course, that's the greatest gift ever. That's the hugest offering possible from that perspective, from my experience of what that offering was, what my teachers had to offer. This possibility of discovering true peace, of discovering happiness, real fulfillment, of really finding out who I truly am, of being encouraged to really be true to myself, of being encouraged to really live this possibility of freedom, of just being myself. And that's just the most precious offering that I've ever found anywhere. And I would say, yes, that is what is offered in satsang. Of course, that is what this is all about. That is this possibility. And yet, it's like, of course, it's nothing I have to offer that you don't already have. And it's not even have, that's not true. But that you can discover your true nature to be. And also another aspect to that I would say is, yes, people do come thinking that satsang will give them something. Naturally, of course, that's what we do. We try to get what we want. We try to get what we think will give us happiness and fulfillment and peace. And also we try to get rid of stuff that we think causes our suffering. And so just to answer that immediately too, satsang doesn't take away anything either. It just helps you see through all of these illusions. It helps you see through this belief that you are this conditioned somebody whose happiness and peace are conditional, who needs to have something and not have something else, who needs to get something and get rid of something else, who needs to get somewhere and get away from something else. And that's what all the suffering is all about. So yes, then there is the possibility that in this discovery, all the suffering can be taken away. Although, truly, satsang doesn't take anything away. So does that make any sense?
Yes, it makes sense. So I'm wondering, I know that you're also offering psychotherapeutic methods as part of your work. And your experience is this realizing of your true nature. Is that a process, or is that for people? Is that something that happens and then it's there, relating to the work that you do with people that come to see you?
Mm-hmm. And again, it's tricky to speak this way, and again I would say it's both. So it's like your true nature has always already been your true nature, and of course realizing that takes an instant, and it's like, what else is needed, And that you discover that nothing is needed. And yet, life also appears in that. And even personal life also appears in that. And in this appearance of personal life, it seems that this personal life more deeply gets absorbed back into yourself. More and more deeply really gets transparent to the truth of yourself. And that seems to be a process that can happen through time and space, and that can be supported, of course. Doesn't need to, if it doesn't need any support, because it is your true nature. And so what support could really be needed to be who you already are? And yet, in this process of more and more deeply realizing this and more deeply becoming transparent to the truth, so to say, I found it hugely supportive. And I mean, again, it's like what I have found to be just the greatest offering of support is what, of course, I very happily pass on if and wherever that is what is asked for and what seems to be useful.
Is there any specific things that people should bring as a prerequisite to wake up? Can anybody come and taste this?
Yes, of course. It's like, it's like this is your true nature. This is who you already are, and this is who everybody already is. So yes, everybody can be themselves. And certainly there has to be a certain interest in the first place to even turn your attention towards that. And for some people that may not even be the case, Some people are not even seeking, some people are not even interested, and somehow mysteriously life just stops them in their tracks wherever they are, or just reveals this to them, even if they're not looking for it. And others are looking for it. And then certainly it seems that there are certain ingredients that seem to help the soup cook more quickly, or I don't know, like some honesty, some honesty first and foremost within yourself, to just tell the truth about what's going on and what you truly want, and if what has been going on has been working for what you truly want, and then there's a certain clarity and a natural intelligence that builds with that, and an integrity and a willingness, to then really see what works and what doesn't, and to have the courage to risk jumping out of those tracks finally that don't work, that don't get you where you want to go, that just distract you, that just take you away from yourself, or seem to.
And would you see your role as a guide, teacher, therapist in pointing out those traps, those ways that don't work to people?
Well, yeah, a lot of the time that seems to be different ways that this role seems to play. For some people, not for others. I mean, there are certainly people who see me in completely different roles, as a customer in their shop, or or their daughter or sister, or or just some stranger or some crazy person. And for others, that seems to be a function that I can serve.
And I'm wondering, in your own personal journey, were you a seeker too, or were you hit by this out of the blue?
Huh. Probably both in a way. Of course, I would say I was seeking. Actually, I was seeking desperately. But then I didn't expect the direction the hit came from, possibly. Because I was really, I was looking for God, And of course I was also looking for happiness and for love. And I most of the time in my life I wouldn't have called it peace or freedom. That came only later, that I got to appreciate those qualities of it really, truly. But I was really looking for love and happiness. And I was desperately looking for it everywhere I could think of. I couldn't think of this direction. So that's where it hit me unexpectedly, so to say. But yeah, I was looking, I was searching in whatever means I could think of from my conditioning, from my background, in the church. and then in therapy and in studying. And a lot of that was very helpful, brought me to certain points, really. Even in church, I would say that I did have a first kind of an awakening experience during a Catholic service, That all of a sudden, it was just so clear that God is here. It's like, how could he not be he? And that there really is no separation. And in that, of course, there is happiness, there is fulfillment and love and joy. And therapy, in my experience, was hugely useful. It got me to that point, actually, where I had turned my back on all of this church and God stuff. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. It took some years of therapy to even be able to go back into a church. That's true. At that point, I said to my therapist, you know what, you're suggesting I could go to a church. I would probably break down and cry all the time. Which I did. I actually went to, for at least a year or so, I went to almost every week. I went to that Sunday service and just sat there and cried. Until then, one day, I had to laugh. It was just, but all of that was useful too, I'm sure, that I just had to cry it all out, just all of that pain over that separation, that loss. That sense of being lost and wrong and bad.
It seems like a lot of people who have come out the other side, so to speak, have gone through a lot of personal suffering and pain in the journeys. Would you say that is necessary for people to wake up, whatever that is, to find peace? To go through a lot of personal pain at a stage in the journey?
I don't know. Certainly has been my experience, and all the people I've seen seems to be the case. And I like to quote Eli here, who says you have to go through hell, but only because you're already in it. And you have to go back the way you came. Because if you don't see it clearly, if you don't go back that way, you just get lost deeper and deeper. And my experience was that, yes, it was very, very useful. And you know what? I wouldn't even want to miss any of it. Especially in my personal case, there certainly was a lot of additional suffering. That was extra psychological, unnecessary suffering, so to say, because in this structure, enneagrammatically, so to say, there certainly is a strong tendency to create more suffering and to even define oneself through suffering. It really was an identity for me, that I was the sufferer,
and I was the victim of this suffering. And then at some point it was really so absurd to realize that actually I was identified with this victim role of suffering, and that it seemed like a loss or a risk to lose this identity. It's like, then who or what would I be? So in a way, yes, and in another way again, no, because it's really the way out of suffering. But sometimes, yes, and for some people more obviously so than for others, because other structures, as we can see very well described in the Enneagram, where that system just makes it obvious that there are different types who deal with suffering in different ways. And my particular structure is one who kind of semi-consciously even produces more suffering, whereas others have much better strategies at ignoring or pretending to not suffer, or just go for fun instead, which also are ways of suffering actually. And then of course for those structures it seems much more so that you have to first become aware of the suffering that's already there, and it seems like, why would you want to go through that if life was fun so far? So yeah, then it seems more like, like you have to go into the suffering first. Whereas for me, I guess it was easier that way, because suffering was very obvious all along anyway. So it was much more obvious that this was an end to that identification with and production of more suffering.
And in the end of that identification, is there then no more suffering?
Again, it's yes and no. Because it's not like what I thought to be the causes of the suffering would stop and not occur anymore. And sometimes, like whatever I would have experienced as painful, fearful, hateful, angry, and I would have believed that that was the cause of suffering. It's not like that doesn't appear anymore, or like my life is just this constant, equal, mellow soup of nothing, Like all kinds of things occur and all kinds of things appear. But I have found it really useful to make a distinction there between whatever the experience may be and suffering, in the sense of believing that this shouldn't be here, that it should be different, that I should be different, that my happiness and peace, or happiness and peace, depend on any of this, or depend on any of this not being there. And then in the willingness to actually meet whatever the experience is, I've discovered again and again and ever more deeply that the experience is completely different from what I thought it would be. And it doesn't have to be suffering. And it can actually be enriching even, and deepening and beautiful. It's like, and I'm sure that we can all find that in our lives, right? That there are moments in everybody's life where, whether intentionally and voluntarily, or because life just forced you to, there is a moment where something catches up with you and resistance stops and you surrender and you just meet it, and there's no more idea of this has to change, this should be different, this shouldn't be this way, but it's just, okay, pain, okay, sorrow, okay, loss, okay, anger, fear, whatever. And you're just there with it. And at the same time, in this just being there with it, there is that openness, there is that vastness of peace. And just in your willingness to meet it with an open heart, there is love. And that gets discovered even deeper. And it gets discovered to be unconditional. Because obviously it does not depend on the conditions you thought it did. And so even only that makes it worthwhile, doesn't it? It's like, who would want to get rid of suffering if that's what it serves? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and then on some level even, who would even want to read a novel or watch a movie where nothing happens? It's like where everything is just always easy and we're all happy all the time, and it's like that's how we meet challenges, that's how we deepen, that's how we learn, that's how life somehow deepens us. That's the best word I can think of right now. Deepens our capacity to be here, our capacity to bear life, and in that really to bear deeper and deeper discovery of love, of peace, of freedom.